as I mentioned, just want to break down Vandy, want to give my preview of the game, and want to give my score prediction for this game. So in this game, this is something that, the team and Josh Chapman, if you are not aware, he was a lineman for Alabama, and he's been on staff. He was on Saban's staff, and he was one of the holdovers with DeBoer. And apparently when all the guys showed up to Malmore and to the athletic facility, there were rat traps everywhere. And, some people thought that it was because of the rat poison comment of Nick Saban, in the media, pretty famous media rant that he had. But based on what Parker Brailsford and Malachi Moore and some of the players have said, it sounds like, Chat was telling everybody, hey, it's a trap game. What happens in a lot of these, that you see a lot of teams happen is they get some really, really big win, and then they go on the road or they have their next game against what some people would consider an inferior opponent, right? Especially inferior compared to the opponent that you just played. And that's a game that will cause people to come out flat because they think they're already better than that opponent, and it will cause you to lose that game. And so that's something that they're trying to really emphasize this week is, hey, we can't have this be a trap game. Like, Vandy is a good team. Vandy plays a very unique style, and Vandy absolutely can score, right? And if you don't play your A game, at the end of the day, this may not be the most hostile environment that you're going to be playing in, but you're still playing on the road, right? You're still not playing in front of your fans in Bryant-Denny Stadium. So this is a situation where you absolutely need to play your A game, or else you could get beat. Right? We saw Missouri just about, top 5 or top 7 team at the time just about go down at home to Vandy just last week, right? So this is a situation where Vandy is not a bad team. However, this is one that you definitely need to take full advantage of, play your A game. And if Alabama plays Alabama's A game, then of course they will beat Vandy. But if they take a game off and they allow this to be that trap game, they could absolutely lose because Vandy does have players, right? So want to talk about, kind of the big things to think about when you think about Vandy. I don't want to do the good, bad, and ugly that I've done in the early part of the season because I think in that Georgia game, we answered a lot of questions that we've had so far in the season, right? We had a lot of questions about the offensive line coming out of that South Florida game. We thought that it looked good in the Wisconsin game, but we wanted to see it again. Alabama gave up 0 sacks against Georgia. Part of that was Milroe magic. There was a couple of times where defenders were running free in the backfield, and Milroe breaks free, doesn't get taken down, and creates a good run out of it. So that's absolutely incredible. But at the end of the day, the offensive line, by and large, played really well, right? So I like what I've seen there. Obviously, early season, there were questions about wide receiver. I think Ryan Williams has that one covered, right? Honestly, the spot that we thought we were most sure about was the running back spot. And that's one that was not seen a lot in the Georgia game. Based on what we were hearing out of Nick Sheridan and Kalen DeBoer, it sounds like they were not as happy with the run blocking. Part of that has to do with the credit to Georgia's defensive line and how well they did shedding run blocks and such. But, again, that is something that you did not see super well in that game. But in general, I don't think it makes a ton of sense to go position by position by position to break down this game. So I want to talk about this game as kind of a whole. What does Vandy do slightly differently, or what do you need to know about Vandy going into this game? Because most of the time when you hear Vandy football, it's a cakewalk, right? And I'm not saying that Alabama may not win this game large, but I do not think this Vandy team is a complete cakewalk because they do play a fairly unique style. And they have an absolute baller at quarterback. And that's what you really need to know. And you need to know his name, Diego Pavia. Our friends over in West Georgia know his name because he was the quarterback at New Mexico State that beat Auburn on the Plains last season, right? So this guy has played in some big games, has won some big games, and is an absolute baller. And what I mean by that is this team runs through him. Vandy really runs more of an option style, not something that Alabama sees super often. Obviously, we don't play really the service academies, and it's a different style than the service academies. I don't want to say fully like that, but they do run a more option-based style. And Diego Pavia is the engine that makes that team go. If we have his stats pulled up, he has been obviously the leading passer every game. He had 178 against Missouri, 270 against Georgia State, 190 against Virginia Tech in a big overtime win, 83 in their win over Alcorn State. That was a 55-0 blowout. I wouldn't take too much notion into that. But he also is their leading rusher, right? So he leads them from a rushing standpoint and also leads them in rushing attempts. He has 71 carries on the season, 279 yards. So he does lead them from a rushing standpoint and is somebody definitely that Alabama is going to have to account for, right? It's going to be a completely different style playing against them. Just like I said, it's not something that Alabama sees every week. The other thing to mention is their leading receiver, right? Pavia does not throw the ball a ton. In fact, it is something to note that in the games that he seems to have to start throwing the ball a ton, that's the games he's lost, right? In the 2 games that they have won, he has thrown for less attempts than he's had rushing attempts or equal. There was one game that he had equal, one game that he had more rushing attempts than passing attempts. In their 2 losses, he had more passing attempts than running attempts. Obviously, that makes sense from a standpoint of if you get behind, you're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more. You may have to press a little bit more. It makes complete sense, but it really leads to, it's not just that one of their wins was against a okay Virginia Tech team, right? I'm not saying Virginia Tech's a world beater by any stretch of the imagination. Virginia Tech, depending upon your opinion of that catch in the Miami game, probably should have won that Miami game, right? So Virginia Tech is a good team, or at least can play up to can play good. And Vandy ends up beating them in that game, and Pavia has more rushing attempts than he has passing attempts, right? So this is a guy that they absolutely want to run their offense through. He's averaging almost 20 rushing attempts a game. He's averaging about 20 passing attempts a game, evened out across the course of the season. And this is just somebody that Alabama will absolutely have to account for. Do I think that Kane Womack can? Absolutely, right? I absolutely think that they can, but it's just a different style than what Alabama's typically seeing. You're not going to see your normal drop back, pro-style quarterback that you often see in the SEC, where they're doing a lot of handing off to the running back and just standard, the quarterback is just kind of there. And maybe you have a guy that has some improvisation with him. You might have a guy in the SEC that you face that can scramble or can run if the play breaks down. No, this is a team that you're going to face that will have plays designed for their quarterback. Honestly, not that dissimilar in the way that Alabama has plays designed for Jalen Milroe, right? Completely different style of game plan, completely different style quarterbacks, but same general idea, right? Alabama uses Jalen Milroe as a pseudo running back. Diego Pavia is that exact same thing for Vandy, right? The other thing to mention is from a receiving standpoint, something that you don't always see. The leading receiver, and by a fairly wide margin on this team, is their tight end. Their tight end has, looking here, has 19 receptions for 220, with second place being 9 receptions for 132, right? So he has over double the amount of receptions and almost also double the amount of yards as the second place receiver, right? So this is something that our safeties with Malachi Moore and Keon Sabb and potentially also Devontae Smith are definitely going to be in this game a lot and are going to have to pay attention, because when they do call some of their shot plays or their pass plays, it is to the tight end, right? And that's not something that you see super often. Really, one of the only teams that utilized the tight end at that elite level over the last few years has been Georgia with Brock Bowers, right? Georgia did not use their tight end as much in this last game as they typically would have, because you didn't have a Brock Bowers, and I'm not calling Stowers Bowers. However, Stowers is by far their leading receiver, right? And so that is something to keep in mind coming into this game. It's just, again, not something you see super often, right? Not saying it's something that Alabama can't handle, but it's something you're going to want to watch going into this game, right? I think that Kane Womack absolutely has that ability to game plan for this kind of style. It's just something that he isn't doing on a game-in, game-out basis. So I am curious to see what that looks like. right? Then from a Vandy defensive perspective, I don't really think that they do anything insanely unique or elite that I think is going to cause Milroe issues. And I think that is the heart of why I think Alabama wins this game and wins this game comfortably, right? I do think that Vandy and the style that they play may be able to score on Alabama, right? I think that there is a okay chance that because of the uniqueness of their style, that Vandy's offense has the ability to move the ball at least early before some adjustments on Alabama. It would not surprise me. I do not, however, think that Vandy's defense has much of a chance of stopping Jalen Milroe and Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard and what we saw against Georgia, especially if Jalen Milroe is playing the type of game that he was playing against Georgia, right? If you go back and watch the film, every time there was a blitzer, he was replacing the blitzer with the ball, right? He was hot reads coming out. If he had to make a throw, he made it. If there was a free runner and he had to escape the pocket, he evaded the runner, beat the guy to the edge, and broke it for a touchdown, right? Milroe made the plays and didn't try to do more than he was asked, right? Oftentimes, like last season, if a free blitzer comes, instead of him taking the check down to the tight end for 7 yards and then let the tight end run with it and replacing the blitzer with the ball, he would end up taking a sack or he would end up trying to run. And he is a good enough athlete that maybe he would end up getting 3 or 4 or 5 yards and he would consider that a successful play. And technically it was a positive yardage play, but A, it causes your quarterback to get hit more often than they should. B, it doesn't really help him from the progression of a passer. And C, you saw a few times in this game, in that Georgia game, that when we hit Cuevas or when we hit CJ Dupree, those big guys got the ball, started running downhill, and Dupree got a 20-yard reception, right? And so just by replacing the blitzer with the ball, Alabama was able to have a successful play on what in years past, or last year, with Jalen Milroe was not the case, right? So I personally think that that's the spot where Alabama has the most success in this game. I think that Jalen Milroe and Ryan Williams and the cast of characters that we saw be very successful in this Georgia game. I trust in the ability of Nick Sheridan. I trust in the ability of Kalen DeBoer. We definitely saw that they had held back some plays from an offensive and defensive perspective going into this Georgia game as to not put too much on tape and hold back some things. But at the end of the day, now you're in conference play, right? Not to say Vandy is Georgia, because they're not. But at the end of the day, you're in conference play, and I fully expect that you're going to continue to see the progression of Jalen Milroe because there's been clear progression from the South Florida game to the Wisconsin game to now the Georgia game, especially with him having the time to throw and DeBoer and Sheridan trusting him to do more things with the ball, whether it be ball placement to the outside shoulder, like on the Ryan Williams throw, or, the perfect throw that he hits on the wheel route that I didn't actually mention in the post cap, but he hits a perfect throw on the wheel route to Jam Miller that could not have been placed any better, right? When Jalen is making those throws, Alabama is going to be near unstoppable on offense, right? His athleticism and how good he is with the ball in his hands, if he's making that throw on the wheel, right? Or it has to be back shoulder and he puts it perfect, where only his guy can make a play on the ball, right? If he's replacing the blitzer with the ball. If Jalen Milroe is making those throws, Alabama is near unstoppable, right? And that is what we're seeing from Kalen DeBoer. It's definitely a Kalen DeBoer and Nick Sheridan teaching Jalen Milroe how to play the quarterback position, right? That was the question. That was the thing, is we thought of Kalen DeBoer as the pseudo quarterback whisperer. People saw what he did with Michael Penix at Washington. Penix was pretty good at Indiana, but then you see what he does at Washington when he has kind of more time to continue to mold him into his system. And I think that it perfectly shows what Kalen DeBoer has had the ability to do with Milroe, and he looks so much better than he did, even in the first game of the season Part of that may be because they, didn't have to be super specific with the play calling because you just got up so big and were so explosive. But how Jalen has been with the ball has been absolutely phenomenal, and I think that's what ends up winning Alabama this game. I personally do think Alabama ends up covering. I believe the spread is somewhere around 22 to 24 points. I have this as around a 28-point win, actually. I'm looking somewhere in the, let's call it 38-10, 42-10 range. I do think, like I said, I do think that early it would not surprise me if Vandy has the ability to score on Alabama and potentially move the ball just with the uniqueness of their style. But I do trust in Kane Womack and the defensive staff's ability to make some adjustments. And I trust in Alabama's ability to make the plays when it counts. And ultimately, I just don't think Vandy is near explosive enough to beat Alabama. And we know that Alabama is explosive enough to beat Vandy. So that's my score prediction. Like I said, I think I'm going to go with 38-10 in this one. Like I said, I do think Alabama ends up winning and covering, fairly easily. It would not shock me if early in this game it was a little bit closer and Vandy was moving the ball a little bit better than what most people would expect. Obviously, if that doesn't happen and Alabama shuts them down completely, then, another Kane Womack masterclass. I don't know that that would shock me either, but just the uniqueness of the style would not shock me if Alabama does struggle slightly early. So that's what we have for the episode. As always, I will be putting out an episode breaking down this game on Sunday. Just as a heads up, I do have another programming note. I'm actually going to be recording an interview episode breaking down something related to the football program and a special collab that they're doing. I mentioned something about it over the summer, but this is kind of an additional episode talking about all of that with one of the people that is involved with it. So if you are interested, please stay tuned. That's going to be coming out probably next Friday based on the schedule. So that's probably going to be coming out on next Friday. But like I said, the recap episode for this game will come out on Sunday as normal. And then next week we will have the preview episode of the South Carolina game as typical. And then we will have the recap episode, the special episode come out on Friday. Just as a heads up, also programming for next week, I am going to be out of town, so that recap episode may not come out until late Sunday night, as I will have to have time to record, as, like I said, I will be out of town and unable to record on a bachelor party. So if you are interested in all the content, I would appreciate you subscribing. Thank you so much for the content. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. I will see everyone in the next episode. Peace.